can look at on the side of like disability sport, our sport has worked really well in that area. You look at the way that we have been much more progressive when it comes to black athletes and coaches than some other sports in our history, down the history, and some of the stuff that's coming out from the Rugby Football League and the Super League kind of helps demonstrate some of those things with some of the player profiles that they're going to be running and stuff like that. Super League have announced, haven't they, that they're going to have a Black History round during Black History Month in a couple of weeks' time, in sort of towards the end of October, the end of Black History Month, which kind of helps be a focal point. We've seen, focal points before in our sport drawn around women's involvement in the sport. Like we talked about disability involvement. There's initiatives done by different clubs around pride and things like that as well. And it's just about making sure that, like this says, we don't miss out on giving everyone an opportunity to have a positive influence on our sport and our sport to have a positive influence on everyone else.
Yeah, indeed.
Dual registration is set to be shelved for 2021 as part of plans around returning to play in the Championship and League One. It's likely the short-term player loan system will not be used next year due to potential issues surrounding COVID-19 and players moving between different team environments or bubbles or what have you during the week. It also means that any loan signing will not be able to train in their parent club bubble whilst on loan at other sides. Although it's a potentially significant cost saving for the Championship and League One clubs, it does look unlikely that mandatory asymptomatic testing will be required. So it'd be similar to what's going on in the Football League, where you only have to get people tested if they're showing symptoms, rather than what we see in the Super League or the Premier League or other top tier level of sport, where there's regular mandatory testing on a weekly sort of basis. So dual registration, what's your thoughts on? I have no idea what your view on dual registration is and where you feel about it being put to one side.
I mean, I think if I had my my dream, it would be that each Super League club and ought to be running a reserve grade as well as a junior academy team. But we've not had that, and costs are such that it's probably unrealistic to think that we can have that in the short term. Absent that, I think dual registration has got its place, and certainly Saints have made, and I know Wigan have as well, made good use of it to give experience to young up and coming players. So I think it's got its place, and I think the Championship and League One clubs have benefited from having a wider pool of talent to draw in and to play with them. So I think it's not ideal for me, but I think it's got its place. I totally understand the position that's being taken here about it's just not going to be feasible to run dual registration during this time until we've got to the other side of this pandemic. I wonder, Mark, whether it'll mean that we see more loans taking place in order to continue to develop young talent that's maybe not going to get sufficient game time with their parent clubs. I wonder whether we'll see more Super League teams loaning people out, albeit that it means that once they're off your books for that year, then they're off your books for that year by the looks of it.
Well, yeah, it's like a 28-day minimum period for the loans, isn't it? So, so for like a month, you won't be able to recall them. You can't have them training with you, so you don't kind of fully know what they're up to. Because if you loan them out to a part-time Championship club, they'll be training twice a week and playing once a week. That's not kind of what you would want, is it, for a young player coming up? Whereas so we're going to have no dual registration and no reserves, and I just feel like it creates a real hole for these young players. And we're going to talk later about 20 or so young players who came in and made the debuts or made second second or third appearances or what have you, starting to make an impression. And it feels like next year they're really gonna not have anywhere to go, which is not ideal. I think I've always kind of been a fan of dual registration. I think if a club links up with another club and that link up can be forged, maybe more so than they even have been done, but much more resource sharing, idea sharing, that sort of thing. That is, to me, the way forward, because I don't think part-time clubs can survive. But so I think this is a blow to clubs. Look at clubs who might have been kind of looking to build their squads around bringing in a good number of dual registration players to support. They'll have 17, and then if they get injuries, they can use these kids who'll come in on dual registration to fill up the matchday 17s or what have you. That's just not going to. So those clubs have to relook at their recruitment and whether they can afford to bring in more players, which they inevitably will have to. Or will there just be this reserve pool of players that the Super League clubs have no games for them to play, so will they even pay them to be on their books if they're never going to be match fit? The Championship clubs will not have the resources to pay for, so then they'll be there kind of almost expected to train on their own, almost to be ready and waiting for when clubs need to bring players in the Championship and League One. It feels like it makes me even more disappointed that so many League One clubs and a few Championship clubs seem to have gone on this recruitment drive where they're all signing really experienced players that are dropping out of Super League towards the back end of their careers.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking, what about all these young talented players at the start of their careers who are the ones that need the game time? Yeah. Do Bradford need to play Danny Brough, or would they not be better off having Lewis Dodd on loan and playing him? But as an example.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I do share your concern. I wonder whether we'll see, as I say, more loans taking place in order to just at least provide some mechanism to get more playing time, even though it's not going to be in the same sort of setup that you would expect to see at a Super League club.
I suppose one thing with doing that, the clubs have learnt this year how to monitor their players whilst they're not with the club, as it were, during the lockdown period. So, the top Super League clubs will have their reserve team coaches or their academy coaches or, that sort of background coaches in contact with these guys, coming up with plans for these guys so that on the 4 days a week where they're not in training with their part-time clubs, they're at least doing something. And so, and they can set them up with equipment at home, maybe potentially. So I suppose that might be the sort of mid-ground thing that is no one's ideal, but might be the only way.
Might be the best of a bad set of options, really.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
Do you want to jump into This Week in Hull Kingston Rovers?
I will, which is practically a programme in itself, isn't it? This Week in Hull Kingston Rovers. And centre Ben Crooks has signed a 1-year contract extension with the club. 27-year-old who has scored 8 tries in Super League this season, a very good return, will remain with the Robins until the end of the 2021 campaign. Not surprisingly, Tom Andrews, the man crush, lives on for another year. Happy to be retaining one of our better players.
He is one of the better players, isn't he? That try scoring rate,
it's good.
On its own is good. He's a player that we've always known as had talent, and it's about being consistent. And I think this year, until he got injured, he was showing consistency.
He was, and I thought he had quite a good season last season in parts as well. Certainly games I caught when I was watching Hull KR, he stood out as someone who was in the better end of the squad range, and I like Ben Crooks actually. I think he's a good player, and he's quite an elusive back to. Certainly scored some tries against us when we played against them.
Yeah, I've always sort of thought of maybe there was an element of maturing that he needed to do, and that kind of cost him some of his opportunities, maybe at Cass, maybe the year he had at Lee. But at 27 now, he needs to show a different is moving towards being a player that has to show some sort of maturity and leadership as well, and probably looks more the part at Hull KR as kind of a more dominant presence in the team.
Yeah.
Ryan Brealey, though, will leave Hull KR at the end of this season after failing to come to terms on a new deal. The halfback, who's been a regular at the Robins since his move from Toronto, was off contract at the end of the season. And this news that he's not been offered a new deal that he deems acceptable at Hull KR has kind of brought up the fact that he's been on a really low deal at Hull KR. Apparently only £16,000 for the year. So we're talking about someone who's potentially their first choice number 7 or number 6 or 7, however you want to play it, being paid an entry level admin wage.
Yeah. That's I didn't know that, Mark. That's a real surprise, and it's no surprise therefore that he's decided he can probably do better somewhere else.
Or they've decided as well that he hasn't shown enough to be offered a top, a first team wage, because he was getting an academy wage, and he's never proved himself, has he, at the Super League level before? No. Do you think this season is shown he can be a consistent Super League player, or do you think the jury's still out and that's kind of where the problem is?
Yeah, I would say I think that's probably right. I'd say the jury's still out. You see flashes of the player we used to see at originally, wasn't it? And you thought, this guy's got something. He could be a good player, and you do see flashes of it, but it's not. He comes and goes in a game, I think, and it's a shame. It's a shame that I still think he'll probably find a championship club somewhere.
It feels like he's more valuable to a championship club than he is to a Super League club, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
For the odd moment in a Super League games or season, I don't get the feeling like he's going to win you many games as a Super League club, but as soon as you put him in a championship side, I think he's going to win you most of your games as a championship side. He can overcome championship defences with his skill set and ability really easily. He just hasn't found that step up consistently. It's weird because he can do so well in the odd game for Scotland, but it's the odd game that's a big game that is built up for. But over a 20-odd game season, he can't. I don't think he can do it week in, week out.
No, he certainly hasn't done so far. That's for sure. Weller Haraki is set to leave Hull KR at the end of the season after being told he will not be offered a new contract. The experienced forward was an ever-present in his debut campaign in 2019 and quickly became a pack leader. Haraki was appointed co-captain for 2020, an honour he shares with Mose Masso, but had to wait until mid-March for his first appearance after sustaining an ankle injury in pre-season. And Tom Andrews says that he's in two minds over this one. On one hand, he did say he was retiring, and once a player has said that, will his mind be 100% on the next year? On the other hand, he's been one of our most consistent players for the last 18 months. Seems a great guy, so wish him luck in his next step. It's a bit odd to me, this somehow. If Weller Haraki wanted to stay on, and as Tom says, he's been one of the better players over the last campaign and a half. Seems a little bit odd that they've decided to cut the ties. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. I thought he was retiring, so kind of like what Tom says there. If he kind of gave a hint of that, and I think his family have talked about this is maybe the time for him to retire and that sort of stuff. So I suppose once it's in your head, does it affect your performances? But it hasn't. It doesn't feel like it has. So yeah, Hull KR feel like they're constantly rebuilding, but what are they building towards? Like the last time it felt like they had a consistent side was the side that had like Michael Dobson in it and David Hodgson, and we're going back 9 years to find that side, aren't we now?
Yeah, we are.
And so maybe they're looking at